Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Walk. Today's one is something that I have been holding pretty close to heart and been dealing with for probably the last 4 years, nearly 5 years since I was born. And it's really around what we sort of go through. And it's got to do with staying soft in a system that works its best to harden you. And for any parent who is dealing with at the moment, trying to navigate a pretty tricky space, which is the medical system, especially when it comes to things such as the NDIS, it's the quiet exhaustion that no one sees. And I've sat on this for quite some time, and I have reflected a lot on it and felt like this is probably our reality, and we need to just be able to deal with it and move forward in the best possible direction. But it is becoming an extremely hard space to navigate for not just us, but a lot of families. And I've been doing research and looking into a lot of it over the years, and it just doesn't seem fair. And it seems that it's a system that is set up to reward those who take advantage of it, and the ones who are doing their absolute best to stay within the rules and within the guidelines. You almost are made to work twice as hard for something that you should be getting as a parent, especially when you're thrown into the world of medical parenting and complex needs. There's an exhaustion that comes with it that's just not from a lack of sleep. It's the constant need to have to be understood and the justifications that come with that. And there are seasons in life, and we go through it a lot, where, it's going to be hard, and life can be very hard at times, but it can also become quite administrative. And it's something that is so tricky to deal with when you do have a family, when you are working, and when you are dealing with complex needs. It's the phone calls, the forms you've got to fill out, the assessments, and at the end of the day, it's the constant justification of my child and their needs and their requirements. There's seasons where you don't have to prove that you care. It's when you have to prove why the care is needed. And the system doesn't just test your patience a lot of the time. It also tests your ability to stay human and stay true to yourself. And we've spoken about previously staying calm in the chaos. And it is extremely hard to stay calm a lot of the time when dealing with this and the constant headaches that do go into it. To be clear, this episode isn't about anger, and it's not about me having a rant. It's about the cost of constantly having to advocate for your child or children, and how easy it is to get worn down, tired and scared, and how hard it is to harden and stay on the path when you're stretched thin. So if you're a parent or a carer or someone navigating this system that sort of feels like it's, got power over your life, you're not alone. And this episode is definitely for you. I'll start off with looking at advocacy fatigue, and it is a real thing. And there is a tiredness that comes from constantly having to justify and explain your situation. You're constantly explaining your child's needs. You're constantly explaining your child and who they are, and explaining why something matters to their day-to-day or their requirements. And it's over and over again that this happens. And they're to people that have never, ever met your family, but they decide to choose what support your child is worthy of. It doesn't come from one bad interaction, this advocacy fatigue. It builds slowly over time. We've had the last 4 and a bit years of dealing with this, and it's getting harder and harder. the system's getting harder and harder to navigate, but it's the time that goes into every single thing that you do. It's the email that takes you hours to write. And it's the email that you sit there and you've got to try and make time with your partner to do, and it ends up being either rushed or you forget the fine details because you're worried if you miss one thing, they're going to reject what you require and what your child requires. It's the phone calls that you make when you are tired. It's the afternoon trying to squeeze them in before 5. You may have one child, you may have 2, you may have 10, trying to find a time where the children are calm enough for you to jump on a call, and then you're thrown on hold and your whole life pauses. Or in our circumstance, I'm at work and I try to take the burden off my wife and I say, let me call them. And I'm trying to squeeze it into a half an hour lunch break. And then I look at the time and I'm like, I've got 5 minutes to explain my situation because you've had me on hold for 25 minutes. And it's when you have to keep having assessments and then of your child's requirements, but then the assessment doesn't feel like understanding it all. It's more of an interrogation. And what makes it heavy is you don't really get to opt out of it once you're in it. And when I say that, I mean, you can't just say to them, I don't have time to advocate today. This is just what I fucking need. And this is what my child needs. It's, it's designed to wear you down. That's my belief. And that's what I'm slowly starting to believe. It's designed to wear you down enough that you stop using it. So you're another person who they don't have to deal with. And, by not being able to say to them, I don't have time to advocate today, I just need this. You keep pushing and things sort of stop moving, and you hit these roadblocks throughout the time and the journey, which we've hit many times, where it's just like we don't have any answers. You're not doing this for your own personal benefit. You're doing it for your children's benefit or your child's benefit, and it's a fatigue that isn't visible, and it doesn't come with a lot of sympathy. And it comes with expectations that you'll just keep showing up calmly, politely, endlessly, and you'll never break. But what it's actually doing, in my opinion, is just constantly breaking families. And it's the invisible cost on the families. And what these systems do is they don't account for the emotional cost that they place on families and their lives. They don't measure the stress, nor do they measure the anxiety. They don't see the arguments that you're having at home, the sleepless nights and the tears behind closed doors. They don't see the strain on marriages when both partners are so exhausted they have to keep going. There's so many times where my wife and I have had a conversation. I'm like, have you spoken to the NDIS, or have you spoken to this person or this specialist? And I haven't had time. And then, because I feel like I'm doing so much, and I know she is as well, but then it's that thing of like, well, you need to have the time or I'm going to deal with it. And it becomes a bit of a bicker, and it's something that's completely out of your control that should just be so easy. And that's how I view it. It should just be a seamless thing for families. And it's not. And it's something that's starting to really take a toll on us, our unit, our family unit, but also I'm starting to see it take a lot of effect on a lot of other families through doing some research into it and reading some shocking stories that break my heart and almost bring me to, or have brought me to tears for some families' circumstances. But these systems don't see the way your finances tighten and how fear creeps in when support feels unstable. And they definitely don't see the moments where you sort of sit there and you go, well, how much more can I carry? And I think the clear message today is it's not about entitlement. It's more about sustainability. Families don't break because they're weak. They break because pressure is applied without relief. And it feels like that relief is never coming, and it's getting further and further away for a lot of families across Australia, especially ones in our situation. I'll be honest, anger is a completely natural response in these situations. It comes from when you're not heard or you feel unheard. Decisions feel inconsistent and the rules change without warning, which seems to be what is happening constantly. There's always new cuts to funding. There's always new guidelines you have to follow. And it doesn't really stop. It just continues and continues. and you get no direction or no clarity. And then when you do call, you're speaking to a different person every time and justifying why you're calling and what your child has to the 50th fucking person you've spoken to in a month. And anger makes a lot of sense to be the reaction to dealing with this, but it's dangerous when it becomes the only place that you live. When you're in a constant state of anger, as I've touched on before, it's not healthy in my view. I mean, anger is a natural emotion and it shouldn't shy away from it, but trying to control that anger when you are put under these circumstances is extremely difficult. And anger hardens you, it sharpens your edges, and over time it'll take more from you than the system ever will. And I know that better than anyone. I've wasted a lot of time, a lot of energy with anger towards these systems that don't benefit any family, in my opinion. If anything, they make it harder. Now, there are some families out there, and I do want to be careful, who probably have a fantastic experience, but they are the ones who aren't dealing with the complex situations that we deal with a child with extreme complex needs. Or they may just be lucky, and that can happen. But from what I've been reading and what I've been looking into, it's far more disturbing and harder for families, and it's getting worse. I've sort of had moments where I feel that anger hardening me, and it's starting to happen, and frustration starts to turn into bitterness, and every email feels like a battle before it's even begun. You going in there with your guard up straight away. You're not actually going in there. You it's that fight or flight, and you're in that fight straight away. The moment you open that email to reply, it's like, fuck you, I'm going to get you. And it's toxic for the mindset and toxic for the body. And what I've had to do is I've had to sort of try and teach myself that, anger can be fuel, but it cannot be the driver. And I found that really important, because use it to your advantage, but don't let it consume you and control you. And if you let anger lead you, you lose the very thing that makes advocacy so powerful, and that's the humanity. And these systems aren't built on humanity. They're built on filling the pockets and fattening the pockets of those, like I said, who wrought the systems, or those who are in power who get to call these shots. They're not there for your humanity. The hardest realization I've had, and I'm sure there's others who have had, is probably this: if navigating these systems are exhausting for us, what does that mean for families with fewer resources? Families with language barriers, families without time, education, or support, families who are already at breaking point. These systems are often navigated best by those who can articulate themselves, persist, and push. And what that means is the quietest families always suffer. And that's the families who just go into their shell and exhaust themselves. Like, parenting's hard enough. And then to not have the support that you're entitled to here in Australia is disturbing and very upsetting for me. Like, I've read some stories of late of families, people who've taken their lives or their kids' lives even. And I think what place they must have been in to get out of, or to get into that situation and that mindset. Like, that's fucked. It shouldn't happen. And staying silent through all this isn't neutral either. Silence, I suppose, protects broken processes. And when people who can speak don't, the cost is paid by those who can't. I'm more than happy to advocate for this and speak up about this, because I do think it's a twisted system. I think it's very backwards, and it needs to get better. And it needs to get better pretty fucking quick. Advocacy isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about refusing to disappear. And that's one thing we haven't done. We haven't disappeared from this or shied away from this at all as a family. My wife handles a lot of it. I get involved on an as-need basis, because there was probably a point in time where I did get involved, and I would advocate for Soul time and time again, and I would just be getting told the same answers, and to the point where I'd be like, I don't fucking know who I'm speaking to. Put me onto the person I spoke to last time. Or put me into who's in charge. I want to speak to who calls the shots. And I've sent some emails and I've said some things on phone calls that I will not regret. That's just being honest. And if it offended those people who did read it or receive those phone calls, then maybe they need to have a good hard fucking look at themselves and understand that if they're not put in the situation we're put in, and many families are put in, they'll never understand. So how can they call the shots? In the middle of all of this, I have come to say something deeply, and staying soft in a system that hardens you is an act of resistance. It doesn't mean you're weak when you're soft. It means you still see a child as a child and not a case number. And that's the hardest thing. Your child ends up becoming like a barcode, where they just scan them into the system and they assume that, oh, yep, they've got this and they've got this. They haven't taken anything into account that's happened in the last 6 to 12 months or why you're calling. Soft means you still believe people can do better even when the system doesn't. Soft means you don't let bureaucracy strip away your compassion, your patience, or your sense of right and wrong. Because once you lose that, the system hasn't failed you, it's changed you. And I refuse to let that happen. And as I've said, I'm getting to a point where I'm refusing it to happen to many other families. This walk and podcast is a place for fathers and carers and parents who are out there, or partners, brothers, nephews, whoever it is listening. But it's also there for families. And I can only imagine, or can't imagine, how some families are dealing with these constant changes and this constant system that refuses to let up and consistently puts families in dire straits. I want to be very clear here, that I'm not anti-system. I'm not anti-structure. And I'm not here to tear anything down for the sake of it, because I do believe that systems can evolve. They have to. I believe people inside them often care deeply, and I believe accountability is a form of respect, not attack. Wanting better doesn't make you ungrateful. Asking for consistency doesn't make you difficult. Expecting dignity doesn't make you entitled. It only makes you human. And at the end of the day, that's all we're doing. We are parents navigating this space. And when you're thrust into parenting with complex situations, medical needs, and the medical system, it's an even harder place to parent one. And then you start layering on more children if you do have them, or, change of jobs, change of location. There's so much that people go on, different paths in their lives, and this system should accommodate to all those paths that those families take. If you're listening to this still, and you're feeling seen and heard, then I'm glad you're here. If you're tired of explaining your worth, then you're not alone either. We go through this on a constant day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. And I'm sure there are countless other families who are going through the same thing. And I just want you all to know that it will get better. It has to get better. But for the meantime, we just have to keep pushing, keep trying, and remembering that our child's well-being's at the forefront. Don't stop advocating for your child, and don't stop advocating for their needs, because they're the future and they're the most beautiful things we have in this world. And when the world is a cruel and harsh place, I do feel that children are the only thing that remain kind and the only thing that remain gentle. But please just know you're not alone. I'm dealing with this, and I'm sure thousands of other families are too. Feel free to reach out if this met you where you are on the Instagram page, or flick us an email, whatever it may be. Later this week, there will be a little video coming, or a snippet. And for anyone who is on this journey or knows my journey, knows Soul's journey, and knows what our family has to deal with, and has been a part of the walk, or even if you're not and you're just someone who's invested into our lives and want to make a difference, and I encourage you to listen to what's coming later this week. I encourage you to sit with it, take it on board, reflect on it. But most importantly, I encourage you to share it. I want it to be a voice and a memoir, not a memoir, it's probably a bad way, but maybe just a voice and a point of call for all parents going through what we go through. So again, thank you so much for joining me here today and taking the time to listen to this. It is something that's a bit more personal, but this walk isn't always going to be a smooth walk. Sometimes it'll be uphill, sometimes it'll be downhill, sometimes it'll be crab walked. We don't know. It's the joy of life, I suppose, is the unexpected, and how to adapt to that unexpected. But thank you for taking the time, for listening. I'm Jake Donnelly, and this is The Walk.